The iron shackles bit into Zara Grayson's wrists as the wagon lurched over another rut in the dusty trail. And she thought that grief was supposed to give a person time to breathe. But her uncle had sold her before her mother's body was even cold in the ground. 24 hours ago, she had been kneeling beside her mother's deathbed in their small cabin outside Tahlequah, Oklahoma, holding a hand that grew colder with each passing moment, whispering promises that she would be strong, that she would survive. Now those promises felt like ash in her mouth as she sat chained in the back of a freight wagon, one of 3 girls being transported like cattle to God knows where. Her mother had died of pneumonia after fighting it for 2 weeks. Zara had nursed her through every fever, every cough that racked her thin frame, but in the end, it had not been enough. The morning after her mother took her last shuddering breath, Uncle Silas had appeared at the cabin door with 2 rough-looking men. He had not even pretended to mourn his sister. He had simply informed Zara that she was now his property to do with as he pleased, and what pleased him was the $200 the traders offered for a healthy 19-year-old girl with all her teeth and no pox scars. She had fought. God, how she had fought. But Silas was a big man, and the traders were bigger, and in the end, they had shackled her and thrown her in the wagon alongside a terrified 16-year-old named Mary and a hollow-eyed woman who would not speak. That had been 3 days ago. 3 days of rattling across the Oklahoma Territory in the brutal August heat of 1878, with only stale water and dried beef to sustain them. 3 days of watching the only home she had ever known disappear behind a cloud of red dust. The wagon master was a man named Cutler, and he smelled like whiskey and old sweat. He drove them hard, stopping only when the horses needed rest. At night, he and his partner would make camp and cook their own food while the girls huddled together in the wagon, still shackled, trying to find comfort in shared misery. Zara had tried talking to Mary, offering what comfort she could, but the girl only wept. The other woman remained silent, staring at nothing. On the 4th day, everything changed. They were moving through rough country, rocky hills covered in scrub oak and prairie grass that whispered in the hot wind. Zara had dozed off despite the wagon's jolting motion, exhausted from 3 nights of barely sleeping. She woke to the sound of shouting and the wagon lurching to a sudden halt. Her eyes flew open just in time to see Cutler reaching for the rifle beside him on the driver's seat. "I said hold right there." A man's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Put that weapon down nice and slow, or I will put a bullet through your arm." Zara scrambled to her knees, chains rattling, and peered through the gap in the wagon's canvas cover. A rider sat astride a big bay horse about 20 yards ahead, blocking the trail. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun, a faded blue shirt, and worn leather chaps. A bandana was tied around his neck, and a rifle rested easily across his saddle. Even from this distance, Zara could see he was young, maybe mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and a strong jaw covered in a few days' worth of stubble. "This is none of your concern, cowboy," Cutler snarled, but his hand moved away from the rifle. "These girls are my property, legal and paid for." "That's so." The rider walked his horse forward a few paces. "Funny thing about that. See, I was in Tahlequah 4 days ago, and I heard about a man selling his niece the day after his sister died. Heard he did not even wait for the burial before he took the trader's money. Now, I am not a lawman, but I know wrong when I hear it." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. Someone had heard. Someone had cared enough to follow. "You got no authority here," Cutler's partner said, his hand drifting toward his own gun. "Maybe not," the rider agreed. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath it. But I have got a Winchester rifle, a quick draw, and a real strong dislike for men who trade in human misery. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to unlock those girls and let them go. Then you are going to ride back the way you came, and if I ever hear of you pulling something like this again, I will hunt you down myself." "There are two of us and one of you," Cutler said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "That is true," the cowboy said. "But I am betting I can drop both of you before either of you clears leather. You want to test that theory?" The silence stretched out, thick with tension. Zara held her breath. Beside her, Mary had stopped crying and was watching with wide, hopeful eyes. Finally, Cutler spat into the dust. "You are making a big mistake, friend. I will live with it. Now the keys." Cutler moved slowly, fishing a ring of keys from his pocket and tossing them onto the ground between the wagon and the rider. "You are welcome to them. Nothing but trouble, the lot of them." The cowboy did not take his eyes off the two men as he dismounted in one fluid motion. He kept his rifle trained on them as he backed toward the wagon, then called out, "Ladies, I am going to come around back and get you out of there. Do not be scared. My name is James Bartlett, and I mean you no harm." Zara found her voice raw from disuse. "We are not scared of you." She heard what might have been a soft laugh, and then he was at the back of the wagon, pulling aside the canvas with one hand while keeping the rifle pointed at Cutler and his partner with the other. When his eyes met Zara's, she felt something shift in her chest. His eyes were a striking gray-blue, like storm clouds over the prairie, and they were filled with a fierce protectiveness that made her want to weep. "Let me get those chains off you," he said quietly. He set the rifle down carefully, still within easy reach, and picked up the keys. His hands were steady as he unlocked Zara's shackles first. The iron fell away and she rubbed her chafed wrists, wincing. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me yet," he said, but his voice was gentle. "We still need to get you all somewhere safe." He freed Mary next, and then the silent woman, who finally looked at him with something like awareness in her eyes. When all three were free, James helped them down from the wagon. Zara's legs nearly buckled after days of sitting, but his hand was there, steadying her. His palm was calloused and warm, and she found herself not wanting to let go. "Can you ride?" he asked her. "Yes," she said. "My father taught me before he died." "Good." He turned to Mary and the other woman. "What about you two?" Mary nodded hesitantly. The other woman just stared. James studied the situation for a moment, then made a decision. "All right, you two," he pointed at Cutler and his partner, "are going to unhitch those horses from the wagon, slowly." "Those are my horses," Cutler protested. "Were your horses," James corrected. "Consider it payment for the trouble. Now move." Under James's watchful eye, the two men unhitched the team. There were 4 horses, more than enough for the 3 women and James. While he supervised, James talked quietly to the women, asking their names, where they were from, whether they had family. Mary, it turned out, was an orphan who had been working as a maid when Cutler's partner had claimed she owed him money and took her in lieu of payment. The silent woman finally spoke, her voice rusty. Her name was Agnes, and she was 28. Her husband had sold her to pay his gambling debts. Zara felt sick listening to their stories, knowing how close she had come to whatever fate Cutler had planned for them. Once the horses were free, James fashioned makeshift bridles from rope and helped each woman mount. Zara found herself on a sturdy dun mare with a kind eye. James swung back onto his bay, keeping his rifle out, and trained on the 2 traders. "Start walking," he told them. "And if I see you following us, or if I hear about you bothering anyone else, that will be the last mistake you ever make." Cutler's face was purple with rage, but he turned and started trudging back down the trail, his partner following. James watched them for a long moment, then turned his horse. "Come on, ladies. Let us get some distance between us and them." They rode hard for the first hour, James setting a pace that was quick but not punishing. He kept checking behind them, making sure they were not being followed. When he finally called a halt beside a small creek lined with cottonwoods, Zara could have wept with relief. The shade felt like heaven after the brutal sun, and the sound of running water was the most beautiful thing she had heard in days. "Drink as much as you need," James said, dismounting. "Take your time. We are safe here for now." The women scrambled down from their horses and rushed to the water. Zara dropped to her knees on the bank and drank until her stomach ached, then splashed the cool water on her face and neck. When she finally sat back, gasping, she found James watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you know to follow?" He crouched down beside the creek, filling his canteen. "I was in Tahlequah visiting a friend when I heard about what your uncle did. The whole town was talking about it, how shameful it was. Most people were content to just gossip, but it did not sit right with me. I have seen too much of that kind of cruelty in this world, and I am tired of watching it happen without doing something." "You risked your life for strangers," Zara said softly. He shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "My mama raised me to do what is right, not what is easy. Besides, I could not have lived with myself if I had not tried." "Well, I am grateful," Zara said, "more grateful than I can say." Their eyes met again, and this time the moment stretched out a little longer. Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks and looked away first. They rested for an hour, letting the horses drink and graze. James shared his provisions with the women, dried venison and hardtack that tasted like a feast after days of near starvation. As they ate, he asked more questions, trying to figure out where each woman wanted to go. Mary had an aunt in Kansas City who might take her in. Agnes thought she might have a sister in Arkansas, but she was not sure. And Zara, when James turned to her with questioning eyes, found she had no answer to give. "I do not know," she admitted. "My mother was all I had. My father died 5 years ago, and there is no one else. Uncle Silas was my only blood, and he made it clear what I am worth to him." Something flickered across James's face, anger mixed with sympathy. "You are worth a hell of a lot more than how he treated you," he said firmly. "Do not ever think otherwise." Zara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She had cried enough over the past 4 days. She would not break down now, not when she was finally free. James seemed to sense her struggle. He stood up, brushing dirt from his chaps. "All right. Here is what I am thinking. My ranch is about 2 days' ride from here, just south of Tahlequah. It is not much, just me and my foreman and about 50 head of cattle, but it is safe and there is food and real beds. You all can come there, rest up, and then we will figure out how to get Mary to Kansas City and Agnes to Arkansas, and Zara." He paused, looking at her with those storm cloud eyes. "You can stay as long as you need to. I have got a spare room in the house and I could use help with the cooking and housekeeping. I would pay you fair wages and you would be under my protection. No one would dare bother you." Zara stared at him. It was too generous, too good to be true. Men did not just offer sanctuary without expecting something in return. "Why would you do that? What do you want from me?" James held her gaze steadily. "Nothing except an honest day's work if you are able to give it. Look, I know you have got no reason to trust me. You have been betrayed by family and treated like property. But I give you my word, as a man and as a Christian, that you will be safe on my land. If you want to leave after a day or a week or a month, I will take you wherever you want to go. No questions asked." There was such sincerity in his voice that Zara felt something in her chest unclench. She looked at Mary and Agnes, who were both nodding encouragingly and then back at James. What choice did she have, really? She had no money, no family, nowhere to go. But more than that, something in her gut told her that this man was genuine, that his offer came from a place of real kindness. "All right," she said. "I will come to your ranch and thank you." "Do not mention it," James said, but he smiled, and it transformed his face. He was handsome when he was serious, but when he smiled, he was devastating. They mounted up again and rode through the afternoon, following game trails and creek beds that James seemed to know by instinct. He was a good guide, pointing out landmarks and making sure the women were managing the pace. When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, he led them to a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock. "We will camp here tonight," he announced. "It is defensible, there is water close by, and I have used this spot before. It is safe." He built a fire with practiced efficiency while the women tended to the horses. Once the flames were crackling, he put coffee on to boil and cooked salt pork in a pan. The smell made Zara's mouth water. When he handed her a tin plate with food and a cup of strong, hot coffee, she thought she might actually be in heaven. They ate in comfortable silence, too tired and hungry for much conversation. After the meal, James banked the fire and spread out bedrolls. He gave the women his blankets, keeping only a thin wool throw for himself, and positioned himself between them and the open side of the shelter, rifle close at hand. "Sleep," he said quietly. "I will keep watch." "You need to rest too," Zara protested. "I will rest later. Right now, I need to make sure you are all safe." Zara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She lay down on the bedroll, wrapped in James's blanket that smelled like leather and wood smoke and something distinctly male, and was asleep before she could form another thought. She woke once in the night to find James still sitting up, silhouetted against the dying fire, keeping his lonely vigil. Something about the sight made her heart ache. She wondered what kind of man he was, this cowboy who rode after strangers to save them. She wondered what had shaped him into someone who would risk everything for people he did not know. Then sleep claimed her again, and she dreamed of storm-cloud eyes and gentle hands. They broke camp at dawn and rode through the morning. The landscape gradually shifted, hills giving way to rolling plains dotted with oak trees and crossed by clear streams. It was beautiful country, wild and open, and despite everything, Zara felt something like peace settling into her bones. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch. Mary was looking better, the terror fading from her eyes. Agnes was still quiet, but she was talking more, sharing small details about her life before her husband betrayed her. James listened to both of them with patient attention, never interrupting, just letting them speak. When they mounted up again, James brought his horse alongside Zara's. "You holding up all right?" he asked. "Better than all right," she admitted. "I feel like I can breathe again." "Good." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I am sorry about your mother. I lost my mama 3 years ago, and I still miss her every day. There is no pain quite like it." Zara blinked against sudden tears. "How do you bear it?" "You just do," he said simply. "You wake up each morning and you put one foot in front of the other, and eventually, the grief becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you. And you honor their memory by living the kind of life they would have wanted for you." "My mother wanted me to be happy," Zara said softly. "She wanted me to find a good man and have a family and live a life full of love. She was so afraid of leaving me alone." "You are not alone," James said, and his voice was fierce. "Not anymore, I promise you that." The intensity of his words, the way he looked at her when he said them, made Zara's breath catch. She did not know this man, had known him for barely a day, but she felt connected to him in a way that defied logic. He had saved her. He had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not even known how to form, and now he was offering her sanctuary protection, a chance to rebuild her shattered life. "Thank you," she said, because there were no other words adequate enough. They rode on into the afternoon. The sun was still high when James pointed ahead to where the land dipped into a valley. "There," he said. "That is home." Zara followed his gesture and saw a cluster of buildings nestled in the valley, backed by a line of trees that must mark a river or creek. Even from a distance, she could see the ranch was well kept, the fences straight and the barn large. Smoke rose from the chimney of a house built of logs and stone. As they drew closer, a man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. He was older than James, maybe 40, with graying hair and a weathered face. When he recognized James, he waved and started walking toward them. "James Bartlett, where the hell have you been?" the man called out. "You said you would be gone 2 days, and it has been 6. "I was about to form a search party." "Sorry, Walter," James said, pulling his horse to a stop. "I ran into a situation that needed handling." Walter's eyes moved to the 3 women, taking in their disheveled appearance and borrowed horses. His expression softened with understanding. "I see. Well, you have always had a talent for finding strays. Come on, let us get you all inside and fed properly." James made introductions as they dismounted. Walter Simmons was his foreman and friend, had been with him since James bought the ranch 3 years ago. He was a good man, James said, and Zara could see it was true. Walter greeted each woman with courtly manners, taking their horses and assuring them they were welcome. The house was small but clean, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living space, 2 bedrooms and a loft. James showed the women to the spare bedroom, which had 2 narrow beds and a washstand. "I know it is not much," he said apologetically, "but it is yours for as long as you need it." "It is perfect," Zara said, and meant it. After days in a wagon and a night sleeping on the ground, the simple room looked like paradise. James left them to wash up and rest, promising to have dinner ready in a few hours. Zara helped Mary and Agnes get settled, then took her turn at the washstand, scrubbing away days of grime and fear. There was a clean dress hanging on a peg, simple calico, but far better than her own torn and dirty garment. She slipped it on, marveling at the fact that James had thought to provide such things. When she emerged into the main room, she found James at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. He had changed into a clean shirt and washed up himself, his dark hair still damp. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "That dress was my mother's," he said. "I kept some of her things. I hope you do not mind." "I do not mind at all," Zara said. "It is kind of you to lend it. It is good to see it worn again." He turned back to the stove. "I am making stew, nothing fancy, but it will stick to your ribs." "Can I help?" "You do not need to do that. You are a guest." "James," Zara said, moving to stand beside him, "you have done so much for me already. Please, let me do this." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and stepped aside. "All right, there is cornbread batter mixed over there if you want to put that in the oven." They worked side by side in comfortable quiet, moving around each other with surprising ease. Zara found herself hyper-aware of his presence, the way his shoulder occasionally brushed hers, the sound of his breathing, the heat radiating from his body in the warm kitchen. She told herself it was just gratitude she was feeling, relief and appreciation for her rescue. But when their hands touched reaching for the same utensil, and her skin seemed to spark with electricity, she knew it was more than that. Dinner was a lively affair, with Walter entertaining them with stories about the ranch and the characters who lived in the surrounding area. Mary laughed for the first time since Zara had met her, and even Agnes smiled. James sat at the head of the table, mostly quiet, but Zara caught him watching her several times with an expression that made her stomach flutter. After the meal, James pulled out a map and discussed routes with Mary and Agnes. He figured he could take them to the nearest town with a train station, get them tickets to their destinations. He would give them money for travel and a little extra to get started. Both women protested that it was too much, but James was firm. "Consider it an investment in justice," he said. "You both deserve a fresh start." That night, lying in the narrow bed with Mary softly snoring in the other one and Agnes's quiet breathing from her pallet on the floor, Zara stared at the ceiling and thought about fresh starts. She thought about James's offer to let her stay, to work for him and build a new life here. She thought about the way her heart had lifted when he smiled at her over dinner, and the way she had felt safe for the first time in weeks when he stood watch over their camp. She was not naive enough to think this was some romantic fairy tale. James was offering her employment, nothing more. He was a good man helping someone in need. The fact that she found him attractive, that her pulse raced when he was near, was her problem to manage. She could not afford to mistake kindness for anything else, could not risk complicating the sanctuary he was providing. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of storm cloud eyes and the sound of his voice promising she was not alone. The next few days fell into a rhythm. James and Walter took Mary and Agnes to the town of Salisaw, about a day's ride east, where they could catch a train. Zara stayed at the ranch, spending the time cleaning and organizing the house, which clearly needed a woman's touch. The men were not slovenly, but there was a certain bachelor neglect evident in the dusty corners and sparse larder. When James returned 2 days later, he stopped in the doorway and stared. Zara had scrubbed the floors, washed all the windows, organized the kitchen, and even picked wildflowers for the table. The house smelled of baking bread and the stew she had simmering on the stove. "Zara," he said slowly, "you did not have to do all this." "I wanted to," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Did Mary and Agnes get off all right?" "They did. Mary was scared but excited. Agnes seemed more at peace than I have seen her. They both wanted me to thank you for being kind to them." "They did not need to thank me," Zara said. "We were all in the same boat." James set down his saddlebags and moved closer. "But you are not anymore. You are here safe. The question is, do you still want to stay? I meant what I said about giving you a choice." Zara met his eyes. "I want to stay. If the offer is still open, I would like to work for you and stay here. I've got nowhere else to go, but more than that, I want to be here." Something flickered across James's face, relief mixed with something warmer. "The offer is open for as long as you want it. Welcome home, Zara. Home." The word settled into her chest, warm and solid. She had not had a real home since her father died, and the cabin she had shared with her mother had always felt temporary, precarious. But this ranch, with its solid walls and good people, felt like it could be a place to put down roots. Over the following weeks, Zara settled into life on the ranch. She cooked for James and Walter, tended a vegetable garden, mended clothes, and generally made herself indispensable. James paid her wages at the end of each week, more than fair, and insisted she save the money for her future. He was respectful, kind, and kept a proper distance. But Zara could not help noticing the way his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking. The way he lingered over coffee in the mornings, talking with her about everything and nothing. The way he smiled when he came in from a long day of work and found dinner waiting, the house warm and welcoming. She was falling for him. It was impossible not to. James Bartlett was everything a man should be, strong and gentle, hardworking and honest. He treated her like an equal, asking her opinion on ranch matters, listening when she spoke. He told her stories about growing up in Texas, about his parents who had homesteaded and built a life from nothing. He had come to Oklahoma Territory seeking his own fortune, determined to build something lasting. One evening in late September, they were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the valley. Walter had gone into town and they were alone. The air was cooler now, autumn beginning to assert itself, and Zara had wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. "This is my favorite time of day," James said quietly. "Everything is peaceful, the work is done, and the whole world seems to slow down." "It is beautiful here," Zara agreed. "I never knew a place could feel like this." "Like what?" "Safe," she said simply. "My whole life I have felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something bad to happen. My father's death, my mother's illness, my uncle's betrayal. But here, I feel like I can finally breathe." James turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I am glad you feel safe. I want you to know that you always will be as long as I have anything to say about it." Zara's heart hammered. "James, why did you really come after me? You could have let someone else handle it or just let it go. Why did you risk so much?" He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally, he said, "Because I know what it is like to be powerless. When my mother was dying, I could not save her. When my father drank himself to death a year later from grief, I could not stop him. I have spent my whole life watching bad things happen to good people and feeling helpless. When I heard about what your uncle did, I knew I could do something about it. I had to try." "It was more than trying," Zara said softly. "You saved my life. You gave me a future." "You are giving yourself a future," James corrected. "I just provided the opportunity. Everything you have done since then, the work, the strength, the courage, that is all you." Tears pricked Zara's eyes. "I do not feel very courageous." "Then you do not see yourself clearly." James shifted closer, his voice dropping. "Zara, you have been through hell and you are still standing. You wake up every morning and choose to keep going. That is the definition of courage." She looked up at him, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. There was admiration there and respect, but also something deeper, something that made her skin tingle and her heart race. "James," she whispered. "I am sorry," he said roughly. "I know I should not say these things. You are working for me, you are under my protection. It would not be right to pressure you or make you uncomfortable." "You are not making me uncomfortable," Zara said quickly. "James, you could never do that." He searched her face. "What are you saying?" Zara took a breath and let herself be brave. "I am saying that I think about you all the time. That I look forward to seeing you every morning and I dread the moment you leave for work. That I care about you in a way that goes far beyond gratitude." She swallowed hard. "I am saying that I am falling in love with you, and I do not know what to do about it." James went very still. For a long, agonizing moment, he just stared at her. Then, slowly, he reached out and cupped her face in his rough, calloused hand. "You are falling in love with me," he repeated, his voice wonder-struck. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank God," he said fervently. "Because I have been in love with you since the moment I saw you in that wagon. So fierce and brave even in chains. And every day since then, I have fallen deeper. I have been fighting it because I did not want to take advantage, did not want you to feel obligated. But Zara, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you hum when you cook. I love how you have made this house a home. I love you and I want you to stay, not as my employee but as my partner. As my wife, if you will have me." Zara's breath left her in a rush. "Are you proposing to me?" "I know it is too soon," James said quickly. "I know you need time and I will give you all the time you need, but I wanted you to know where my heart stands. I love you, Zara Grayson, and I will love you for the rest of my life if you let me." Zara did not think. She just acted on pure instinct, leaning forward and kissing him. James froze for half a heartbeat, then wrapped his arms around her and kissed her back with a fervor that stole her breath. His lips were warm and firm, and the kiss tasted like coffee and promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zara felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I do not need time to know what I want, James. I want you. I want this life. I want to build a future here with you." James let out a whoop of joy and pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "You have made me the happiest man alive," he said roughly. "I swear to you, I will spend every day proving you made the right choice." "I already know I did," Zara said, wrapping her arms around him and holding on tight. For the first time since her mother died, she felt complete. She felt found. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Tahlequah. Walter stood up with James, and the preacher's wife stood with Zara. It was nothing fancy, but Zara wore a new dress that James had bought her, pale blue cotton with lace at the collar, and she felt like a queen. When James slipped his mother's gold ring onto her finger and promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, she believed him with every fiber of her being. The wedding night was gentle and sweet, James patient and careful with her inexperience. He made love to her like she was precious, like she was something to be treasured, and Zara fell even deeper in love with this man who had saved her in every way possible. Life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Zara was no longer just the housekeeper but the lady of the house, and she threw herself into the role with enthusiasm. She expanded the garden, learned to help with the cattle when extra hands were needed, and turned the house into a real home. James was an attentive husband, never taking her for granted, always making time to talk with her, to listen to her thoughts and dreams. They talked about building a bigger house someday, about expanding the herd. They talked about children, both of them wanting a large family to fill the house with love and laughter. Zara felt her past receding, the pain of losing her mother easing into a bittersweet ache rather than a raw wound. She knew her mother would have loved James, would have been so happy to see her daughter safe and loved. 5 months after their wedding, on a cold February morning, Zara woke feeling ill. She barely made it outside before she was sick, retching into the bushes while James held her hair back and murmured soothing words. When it happened again the next morning, and the morning after that, understanding dawned. "I think I might be pregnant," she told James over breakfast. His fork clattered to his plate. "Pregnant," he repeated. "Are you sure?" "Not certain, but I think so. I have missed my monthly courses and the sickness, and I am so tired all the time." James was around the table in an instant, pulling her up and spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby," he shouted. "Walter, did you hear that? I am going to be a father." Walter, who had been quietly eating his eggs, grinned. "Congratulations to you both. This ranch could use some young energy." Zara laughed, caught up in James's joy. "We do not know for certain yet," she cautioned. "I know," James said confidently. "I can feel it. We are going to have a baby." He was right. The local midwife confirmed it a few weeks later. Zara was about 2 months along, which meant the baby would arrive sometime in September. James was beside himself with excitement, immediately starting to plan how they would convert the small storage room into a nursery, how they would need to hire more help so Zara would not overtax herself, how he would build a cradle and a rocking chair. "James," Zara said, laughing, "slow down. We have months yet." "I know," he said, "but I want everything perfect for you and the baby." "It already is perfect," Zara assured him, "because I have you." The months passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. Zara's belly swelled, and James treated her like she was made of glass, constantly fussing over her. She found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure. Walter was almost as bad, taking over many of her heavier chores and refusing to let her lift anything heavier than a soup pot. The baby came on a warm September evening, almost exactly a year after Zara had arrived at the ranch. The labor was long and difficult, but James never left her side, holding her hand and encouraging her through each contraction. When the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced infant in her arms and announced, "It is a boy," Zara wept with joy and relief. "A son," James said, his voice choked with emotion. "We have a son." They named him Thomas after James's father, with the middle name of William for Zara's father. Little Thomas was healthy and strong-lunged, and from the moment James held him, Zara knew her husband was completely smitten. He was a devoted father, taking every opportunity to hold the baby, to rock him, to sing to him in his off-key voice. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy, adventurous toddler with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. When he was 2, Zara gave birth to a daughter they named Zara Grace, who was quiet and thoughtful where her brother was loud and energetic. 2 years after that came another son, Matthew, who looked like a perfect blend of both parents. The ranch prospered. James was a smart, hard-working rancher, and with Zara's support and Walter's steady help, the operation grew. They added more cattle, built a bigger barn, and eventually constructed the larger house they had dreamed about, with plenty of bedrooms for their growing family and a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun set over their land. Zara never forgot where she had come from, the darkness of those days in the wagon, the despair she had felt. But that experience had led her to James, to this life, to a happiness she had never imagined possible. She thought sometimes about her mother, hoping that somehow she knew that her daughter had found the good man and the love and the family she had wished for. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James took Zara up to the ridge above the ranch, where you could see the whole valley spread out below. The 3 children were home with Walter, probably causing chaos, but for this moment it was just the 2 of them. "I come up here sometimes," James said, his arm around her waist, "when I need to think or just breathe. And I look down at that house at our home, and I still cannot believe how blessed I am." "We are both blessed," Zara said, leaning into him. "James, do you ever regret it, riding after that wagon, getting mixed up in my mess?" He turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Never. Not for one single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara. You and our children, this life we have built, it is more than I ever dreamed of. I love you more today than I did the day I married you, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Zara kissed him, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into it. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," James corrected. "I was just existing before you came into my life. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something lasting. You made me whole." They stood together on the ridge as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and gold, and Zara thought about the journey that had brought her here. The grief and terror and betrayal, yes, but also the courage and hope and love. She had been sold by her uncle the day after her mother died, treated like property, like something less than human. But a cowboy had found her and brought her home safe, and in doing so, had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. Down in the valley, she could see Thomas chasing the dog around the yard while Sarah sat on the porch with a book and Matthew toddled after his older brother. She could see the smoke rising from the chimney, the golden light in the windows, the barn where the horses nickered in their stalls. She could see the garden she had planted, the orchard James had put in 2 years ago, the swing he had hung from the big oak tree. She could see home. And she could see her future, stretching out bright and beautiful before her. A future filled with more children, perhaps, and definitely filled with love. A future with this man who had risked everything for a stranger and who had chosen her every day since. A future built on the foundation of that terrible journey that had ended in rescue and redemption. "We should get back," James said eventually, "before Walter loses his mind trying to manage all three of them." Zara laughed. "Yes, we should, but James, thank you for everything. For choosing me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "Always," he said simply. "Now and forever, Zara. You are mine and I am yours, and nothing will ever change that." They walked hand in hand down the ridge toward home, toward the life they had built together, toward the family waiting for them. And Zara knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The darkness of her past had led her to this light, and she would be grateful for it every day for the rest of her life. The ranch continued to thrive as the years rolled on. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved the land as much as his father did, learning everything James could teach him about ranching and cattle, and being a good steward of the earth. Sarah, with her quiet intelligence, became the family's reader and dreamer, though she could also rope a calf when needed. Matthew was the charmer, quick with a smile and a joke, able to talk his way out of trouble as easily as his siblings could get into it. When Zara was 32, she gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Elizabeth, who turned the household upside down with their matching faces and opposite personalities. Emma was bold and fearless, Elizabeth shy and gentle. James was completely wrapped around all of their fingers. Walter eventually married a widow from town, a kind woman named Martha who became like a sister to Zara. They built a small house on the ranch property, and Martha helped with the children and the endless work that came with running a household. The two women became fast friends, spending long afternoons in the kitchen, talking and laughing while they canned vegetables or baked bread. Zara never saw her uncle Silas again, and she was grateful for it. She heard through the grapevine that he had died in a bar fight in Kansas, and she felt nothing but a distant sadness for the waste of a life. She had let go of her anger toward him years ago, realizing that holding on to it would only poison her own happiness. He could not hurt her anymore. She was safe, loved, protected by a man who would move mountains for her. On the 20th anniversary of the day James had stopped that wagon, Zara woke to find her husband already dressed, sitting in the chair by their bed and watching her with an expression of such tenderness it made her throat tight. "What is it?" she asked, sitting up. "You know what day it is?" He asked quietly. She thought for a moment, then understanding dawned. 20 years. 20 years since the best day of my life," James said. "The day I found you." Zara got out of bed and went to him, settling into his lap like she had done 1,000 times before. At 39, she was no longer the thin, frightened girl he had rescued. She was a woman in her prime, strong and confident, with laugh lines around her eyes and silver threading through her dark hair. And James, at 46, was still the most handsome man she had ever seen, even with the gray in his hair and the deeper lines on his face. "It was the best day of my life, too," she said, "even though I did not know it at the time. Everything I have, everything I am started that day," James said. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had not followed, if I had just let it go, minded my own business." "Do not think about that," Zara said firmly. "You did follow. You did save me. And we have built this beautiful life together. I want you to know," James said, his arms tightening around her, "that I would do it all again. 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. Finding you, loving you, it is the best thing I have ever done." Zara kissed him, slow and deep. "And loving you is the best thing I have ever done. You gave me everything, James. A home, a family, a reason to keep living when I thought there was nothing left." They sat together as the sun rose, holding each other close, and Zara sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the twists of fate that had brought them together. Out of tragedy had come triumph. Out of despair had come hope. And out of the darkest moment of her life had come the greatest love she could have imagined. The children were older now. Thomas almost 21, and talking about starting his own herd on a section of the ranch James was planning to deed to him. Sarah was 18, and being courted by a nice young man from town, a schoolteacher who appreciated her love of books. Matthew, at 16, was still deciding what he wanted to do with his life, torn between staying on the ranch and seeking adventure elsewhere. The twins, at 7, were handfuls of energy and mischief that kept everyone on their toes. Zara and James had talked about what would happen when the children were grown and gone, when it would be just the two of them again in the big house. But that was still years away, and for now, they were content to live in the moment, to savor the chaos and joy of a full home. One evening in late fall, when the leaves were turning gold and the air had that crisp bite that promised winter, the whole family gathered for dinner. Thomas had brought his girl, a sweet-faced rancher's daughter named Lucy. Sarah's beau, Daniel, was there too. Walter and Martha joined them, and the table was crowded and loud with conversation and laughter. Zara looked around at the faces she loved most in the world and felt her heart swell with gratitude. This was what mattered, not the money in the bank or the size of the herd or the land they owned. This, the love and the laughter and the connection, this was what made life worth living. After dinner, when the dishes were cleared and the children were playing a rowdy game of checkers in the corner, James pulled Zara outside onto the porch. It had become their habit over the years, these quiet moments stolen from the chaos, where they could just be together. "Thomas is going to propose to Lucy," James said. "He asked me for my blessing last week." "I know," Zara said. "Lucy told Sarah and Sarah told me she will say yes. They are good together." "They remind me of us," James said. "The way he looks at her like she hung the moon. The way she steadies him." "You still look at me like that," Zara said softly. "Because you still hang my moon," James replied. "Every single day." They stood together, looking out over the land they had built their life on. In the distance, Zara could see the lights of Walter's house, could hear the faint sound of music as Martha played her piano. Closer in, the barn was dark and quiet, the animals settled for the night. And behind them, the house was warm and bright, filled with the people they loved most. "Do you ever wonder what your mother would think of all this?" James asked quietly. Zara considered the question. "I think she would be happy," she said finally. "I think she would be proud. She wanted me to survive, to find joy again after losing her, and I have done that." "I have done more than survive, James. I have thrived, and that is because of you." "It is because of both of us," James corrected. "You are not the same frightened girl I found in that wagon, Zara. You were always strong, but you have become even stronger. You have built this family, this home. You have loved our children and taught them what it means to be good people. You have made me a better man just by being beside me." Zara felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, James could still make her cry with his honesty and his love. "I am so grateful," she whispered. "For all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me to you." James pulled her close, and they stood wrapped in each other's arms as the stars came out one by one overhead. Somewhere in the house, one of the children called for them, and they would have to go back inside soon, back to the noise and the chaos and the wonderful disorder of family life. But for this moment they were alone together, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and beautiful. "I love you," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than words can say." "I love you too," Zara replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." They went back inside together, back to their children and their friends and the life they had created. And as Zara helped Martha serve dessert and listened to Thomas and Walter argue good-naturedly about the best way to break a horse and watched James show Matthew how to properly sharpen a knife, she felt a deep, abiding contentment settle into her bones. This was happiness. This was home. And it had all started on a dusty trail in Oklahoma Territory, when a cowboy with storm cloud eyes had stopped a wagon and changed her life forever. She had been sold by her uncle the day after her mother died, treated like property and driven toward a fate she could not imagine. But James Bartlett had found her and brought her home safe, and in doing so, had given her everything she had ever dreamed of and more. Years later, when Zara was an old woman with grandchildren climbing on her lap and great-grandchildren playing at her feet, she would tell them the story. She would tell them about the darkest day of her life and the man who had appeared like an angel to save her. She would tell them about the ranch that had become her sanctuary and the love that had healed her broken heart. And she would tell them that sometimes, out of the worst tragedy, comes the greatest blessing, but that was still far in the future. For now, Zara Bartlett was 39 years old, surrounded by the family she had made and the man she loved more than life itself. She was safe, she was cherished, and she was home, and that was more than enough. That was everything.